Without alcohol as a social lubricant, Aiden next meets Emma in broad daylight, the day following their wild Halloween adventure together. So begins Chapter 9, and Aiden's dissection of his new friend. Emma is both a physical and psychological specimen for the socially awkward man, but it is difficult to isolate her in any environment where other people have prior claim to her attention. The Dancing Star, Chapter 9. Bray's disappearance necessarily upset the painter, and the idea he could write anything productive in his journal at the coffee house was distasteful. Still, habit and ritual were deep wired in him, if not always finding substance in them. He was suddenly torn between two females in his otherwise barren life, yet was fated to act on only one. Being and nothingness seemed slow for a school day, so he gravitated to a table he sat at twice before. By osmosis. Stepping to the counter to order his drink, he saw her before she spotted him. The beautiful brunette looked no worse for their night together. The verdigris cast to her eyes conveyed only subdued recognition. A whirlwind had transpired between them, yet the abruptness of the second encounter so soon after the first was, in Aiden's estimation, the awkward first date missed the first go-round. Sober, he opened his mouth to babble. Lattes. Do you have lattes? A large one? Her smile was hard to gauge. Aiden blurted the first thing that came to mind. You're not wearing your glasses. I wear them when I want to appear older, she said. He groped in a pocket for his wallet. How old are you? I just turned 23. There was always a disconnection when he was brought face to face with the numbers. He grinned in an amble while she prepared his drink. The painter wanted to see the graduate student as a child, like Bray, but with her back momentarily turned, he could not help take inventory of all of her attributes that were decidedly not childlike. Even allowing for flat sandals, he guessed her to be 5'10". Her bones and height prevented her from being delicate. Still, her chiseled line and long legs made her resemble expensive Lalique art glass. Her ensemble, an ashen gray cardigan sweater pulled over a simple indigo blue dress, aspired to modest maturity, and perhaps such trappings made him too eager to be taken in by her wiles. Yet the presentation the night before had been so deft and dazzling that any man susceptible to the flattery of a pretty girl should be forgiven for temporarily forgetting age. The line separating daughters from prospective lovers, in a man's mind always, is never wider than a single thin strand of DNA. The barista met his dissecting gaze, forcing him to guiltily redirect his attention to a stain on the counter. On setting his drink down, she ventured her own evaluation. You're quieter than I remember. Aiden volunteered some of his feelings. I'm afraid it's not a good day. My neighbor's little girl has gone missing. That's terrible. Pained by her intrusion, the mug was pushed toward him with an easing expression. It's on the house today. Compliments of me. He was pulled halfway out of his mood. My name is Emma, she said. Emma Breton. Aiden, he replied. Aiden Gage. With names properly exchanged, the patron moved away to make room for the next customer. The coffee was consumed without his customary calculation, while his most steadfast companion, self-pity, tugged him through the chair seat to the scuffed floor. Had the bachelor married years ago, he would not be forming designs on young women. He knew he should not encourage his foolhardy infatuation yet, despite this better judgment. he was unable to stop gawking at Emma. Mercifully, she had no time to notice. Maybe she bore him no true feeling, in which case it was for the best. Aiden was already a regular at the coffee house. This would not change. However, any subsequent attempt to engage the graduate student would be anticipated with a degree of anxiety. Given this, the painter decided, in a magnanimous turn, not to further the acquaintance. She would be his muse, but distantly. He would come here to write or sketch in his journal each day, and then return home to throw his unrequited feeling into his creative work. It was a proven formula, and worked too well to his admitted detriment. His worshipping women from afar was more than a lifelong practice. It was an incurable disease. In this painful instance, at least, it was welcomed deliverance. Whether she would be flattered by his attention or indifferent to it, he hoped she would not lump him in with other older men who came into the coffee house to leer at her. His attraction would not be so crude or intrusive, nor would it be calculating or ingratiating. He would admire her with the quiet reverence of someone who needed more than wanted her. Directly, a group of young bohemian types came in to chat up the barista. Aiden was familiar with their ilk from his erstwhile incarnation as an MFA student. He pegged them as slummers, marginally talented offspring of moneyed East Coast families who venture into the heartland to slum it in art school for a few years. Beyond their brie crust of culture, these artisans had acquired a painterly craft, but with nothing more to paint than views out their shabby chic student apartment windows. When not defacing perfectly good canvases, they splattered paint on their black clothing like stigmata. All these years later, the painter could not shake his inferiority complex around this alpha group. He was, and always would be, by their estimation, he believed, a commuter college parvenu with something to prove. This outsider status had allowed him to heroically portray himself as the provincial Cézanne among his Parisian betters. The visiting trio, 2 males and a female, left the building to smoke, and Emma, who apparently did not smoke, took a break to keep them company. He watched her interact with the young men through the window, and knew only one of them would have to do. This breathing space permitted him a moment to remember his earlier state, his mournful pining for the other female in his life. This pure, fatherly attachment for the missing child was something for which no one could fault him. His melancholy inspired him to open his journal and begin writing. The words quickly took the ill-advised form of a poem. He kept it in the most general terms by addressing it to his idée fixe. Emma continued to ignore him on her return, and so the die was cast. The evening episode between them had been a drunken flirtation that, in the full light of sobriety, was put into proper perspective. Still, in keeping with his stoic fatalism, the patron stayed dutifully through the rest of the barista's shift. Preparing to leave, she went into the bathroom with a tote containing a change of clothes, trading out her indigo frock for a striking 60s cocktail dress of black and white geometric design. She blew by his table on the way to the door without making eye contact, obviously to dampen any expectation he may have formed. Once she was safely off the premises, the poet glanced again at his effort. He had not written a dedication. His first impulse was to write the child's name, but he wrote Emma instead. He was immediately remiss on setting down the pen, so tore the page from the book spine with the thought of throwing it away. As the last inch ripped free, the young woman, having circled back, abruptly hovered over him. The startled patron crumpled the page and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Are you busy?" she asked. "No." "Do you feel like eating a late lunch or early dinner with me?" He exhaled. "Both." Emma whisked him down Broadway at a heady pace. High heels put her dauntingly at eye level, while her stature and gait made her vintage dress look haute couture. Beyond a trace of henna in her long dark hair, her bohemianism was all but subsumed by a sensibility better described in dog-eared pages of old copies of Vogue. No glaring tattoos labeled her as conventionally counterculture. Not that tattoos would have mattered to ogling men passing by on the sunny sidewalk. The nonpareil stopped at the corner to pull another sweater from her bag, a black and beaded affair with white cuffs turned up like calla lilies at the elbows. Its prim and properness barely dented the eye traffic. They arrived at a vintage Ford Mercury convertible, lately red in color, but not in the best of conditions. Doubtless its leather cover hood was inoperable, which meant it could only be exhibited on sunny days and spent every other day under a waterproof tarpaulin weighted with bricks. After the shock of it wore off, the vehicle seemed to fit its eclectic owner. Emma had invented her glorious self out of improbable parts, betraying, in his estimation, the best kind of genius. She opened the back seat of her car to rummage through a vast shoe selection in the floorboard, leaving him at curbside to watch her sort through heels and sandals with the patience of a man willingly under a spell. Finding a pair of espadrilles to her liking, a sartorial adjustment was made, and the two hopped in the vehicle to speed away. Plastic dinosaurs were epoxied to the dashboard, and a cowrie shell necklace hung along with a crucifix from the rearview mirror. Aiden looked for a place to park his feet among the diet soda cans and footwear. He situated his long body in the space left him, while she insisted, "This will be fun." The graduate student took her new friend to a local Irish pub called the Third Policeman. High-backed wooden booths, painted in red lacquer, jutted into a narrow lane from the door, while Tiffany knockoff lamps hung precariously low from the ceiling. Emma held on tenaciously to her companion's arm. He did not resist for fear of losing it. She threw up her hand, and a corresponding gesture came from a dark table in the corner. Another coffeehouse waitress was seated there, who was recognized as Cleopatra from the previous night's party. Emma formally introduced her. "This is Erica." The fellow barista did not bother to stand, but pointed her cigarette at the man like a finger. "Large latte, half decaf," she dubbed him. Emma shoved Aiden beside her friend and sat across from them. "Erica's thinking about becoming a lesbian," she volunteered. The plucky woman flicked her ash. "Well, it's not official yet. I'm still waiting on paperwork." Erica was low-built and curvaceous. She was attractive in a quintessentially big-boned Midwestern way. Her bobbed black hair was tinged with the colors of comic book pages, and her ice blue eyeshadow clumped where she squinted out from under thick bangs. While Emma was a rank amateur at cultivated aloofness, she was a seasoned practitioner. "Are you the one who posted the advertisement for a model at the coffee house?" she inquired. "Yes," he answered nervously. "What do you pay per hour?" Aiden backtracked. "I haven't decided yet. I'm still settling in." "Not a lot of money-making opportunities in this town," she complained. Aiden locked eyes with the waiter in a fidget, and, inspired by his choice of hamburger and fries, the two ladies ordered the same. He frowned mockingly at Emma. "I thought you were a vegetarian." The graduate student puffed up, informing him, "Most of the time I am, but today I'm celebrating." Erica was peckish. "Kill the fatted calf. I'm starved," she declared. "What are we celebrating?" "I paid my rent this month." Both women chortled in that synchronized way young women have before their conversation turned to topics of mutual interest between them. This left the infiltrator sidelined until Emma said something that pricked his ears. Tanner came by the coffee house today to tell me he was awarded the Nader Kaufman Scholarship for next year. Erica was arid.
I'm sure Jacques the Troll won't be happy about that.
Aiden dipped in. What's his story exactly? Emma shook her head. Jacques is the perennial graduate student in the fine arts department. He keeps changing his area of concentration. Right now he's into performance art and mostly poses in professors' yards as a kind of protest over disparate pay rates between faculty and associative instructors. Erica was in a mood.
Last year he posed in front of one of the sorority houses, conveniently near a bathroom window. The only thing convincingly ceramic about his performance was his perpetual hard-on.
The diminutive artist clearly did not impress her. There was another flick of ashes.
Speaking of freaks, I heard the old wino was killed yesterday at a construction site.
Emma showed concern. How?
A falling beam or something. I guess his metal detector didn't give him much of a heads up.
What a horrible way to die, exclaimed the friend. Erica snuffed out her cigarette, grunting.
Beats mistaking antifreeze for liquor.
Emma winced at the caustic humor.
Here's the kicker, though,
the gossiper chomped.
Police found a cache of cell phones in his hefty bag.
Were they stolen? Gasped the friend. Erica shrugged.
Stuff stupid students dropped, probably. They practically crapped their parents' money. Most of them don't have the sense God gave a stack of dinner napkins.
Once food was served, the curt barista practically inhaled hers. Between her rough language and nicotine varnish, Aiden did not see her being a good influence on Emma. His opinion was already prejudiced by her behavior at the party, and she gave him no reason to amend it. Erica's countercultured guise was a defense, which perhaps betrayed insecurity she might have felt about being a college-age female, not in college, in a college town. This outsider status was likely as much imposed as freely embraced. Regardless, her barbed company was not long suffered. She scoffed down the last of her burger and departed, leaving Aiden to wonder why she came at all. It might have been to give Emma an excuse to conclude the date, if lunch did not go well. With the friend gone, the meal took on a different character. The talkative grad student continued to pick at her hamburger, eating most of the patty, the pickle, and torn off bits of bun. Her plate by the end looked like a child's subterfuge, an arrangement of food intended to convince a parent there was somehow less of it. She soon dispensed with the pretense of eating and pulled a stack of photographs from her handbag. They advanced on every unused inch of tablecloth. The quality of artwork was impressive for a student, and Aiden was never begrudging in his praise for things he liked. The opportunity to play professor also gave him another way of conversing with the young woman. By the time the impromptu critique wound down, table conversation turned casually to topics unrelated to school. The painter took advantage of proximity and low bar light to study his companion's face with uncharacteristic abandon. Emma's skin possessed a delicate translucency, as if Adolphe Bouguereau, the French salon painter, had built it up in layers of feathery white scumblings. At some point, she slipped on her black-rimmed glasses, possibly to lend sophistication to her bubbly chatter. Her youthful turn of mind was not so easily masked. She employed her body to accent grammatical flourishes, shifting her weight from hip to hip to insert commas for dependent clauses, and then tilting her head to add a semicolon. There was little artifice in her manner, however. She may have been in college, but her combination of swagger and charm was that of a woman in full command of her talents. In the course of the extended lunch, Aiden realized someone over his shoulder succeeded at distracting Emma. Before a plan could be formed to ascertain the source of this distraction, the professor from the party came by the table on his way out with a colleague. "Emma," he said in a greeting, glancing at the scattered photographs. There was a possessive glint in the look he bore her, an insincerity in the smile he threw Aiden. "I hope when you feel better, you can model for me again." Emma's reaction was cordial, and the two men continued to the door. "Feeling yourself?" inquired the companion. "Have you been ill?"
My father died last month after a long illness. I left school for a week.
"I'm sorry to hear that." With her showy feathers tucked down, the pictures were raked off the table and returned to her bag. She was suddenly younger than he ever could imagine. "And your mother?" he continued.
We don't talk much.
Aiden approached his next subject cautiously. "Is the man who was just here a teacher of yours?"
His name is Seth Bowles. He helped me get a scholarship. I modeled for him once.
The emerging picture was not a good one. Aiden would not probe further for fear of discovering more than he wanted to know. A gesture was made on her part to grab the bill. He snatched it away. Emma protested.
I'm putting this on my credit card. This is my treat. I invited you out.
The painter was adamant, rising with check in hand. The two converged on the sidewalk after a few faltering steps. During their absence, the early afternoon light had come and gone. Buildings were giving umbrage to longer shadows along Fairfax. They were soon again motoring. Seeing Emma wounded made Aiden's feelings complicated. Some of the parentalism he bore for Bray was now being portioned out to the practically parentless photographer. He doubted Emma was aware of Erica's involvement with the married man, and, were it true that she too was caught up with them, betrayal loomed in her future on two fronts. His emergence on the scene put him in good position to comfort her, but he could not say from where this comfort would issue. He was not an opportunist by nature, yet found his cross-current of attraction and fatherly regard for the young woman dizzying. It was the father in him that wanted to salvage something of her spirits. "Emma is a beautiful name," he told her. Her face brightened.
I'm named after Emma Woodhouse, Jane Austen's heroine.
Aiden smiled. "She's my favorite writer."
You've read her books?
"No, I have video box sets of all of her novels." Emma puzzled.
Why do you like her?
The man turned it over. "My friend says poets write tragedy, but philosophers write comedy. Austen's philosophical outlook on life was similar to Aristotle's, a place for everything and everything in its place. She was even Aristotelian in marrying off young women to older men."
So who do you prefer, Emma or Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice?
"I love both equally."
Why?
"Because they both had good relationships with their fathers. That always bodes well for a woman." Emma looked off through the windshield with another shade of barely there melancholy.
When I was a little girl, my father always had money to buy me dresses.
The bittersweet cast of her face prompted the bachelor to make an observation. "I suspect you also have a little Emma Bovary in you." His close study touched her.
Is that another book you haven't read?
"No, I had to read that one in college." She laughed and turned over a few stones of her own.
You know, you haven't said anything about your art.
Aiden demurred. "My art is like a crazy aunt you keep in the attic. You only get to meet her if you agree to meet the folks for Thanksgiving."
Does that mean I have to date you to see your art?
Her broad grin indicated the question was likely rhetorical. She stayed in this vein.
Do you have a sweetheart?
Her disarming inquiry made him equally candid. "I made a few attempts at dating in college, but it never worked out. Not that anything would have worked out in my 20s.
Are you one of those hopelessly misunderstood romantics who writes poems to girls?
He did not reply.
Have you written a poem to me?
Aiden stared at the passenger window. The woman's excitement was not dampened.
I've always fancied myself a muse. I can be your muse. You can paint me.
You may be of a different mind after meeting the crazy aunt. Emma laughed again.
You mentioned your 20s. How old are you?
32.
You look to be my age.
A customary pause followed this declaration, but she quickly observed,
Age isn't that big a deal, unless you're drooling on your shoes.
The graduate student answered a question that had not been asked. a question posed by her subconscious mind and to which she gave a verbal response. The question being, does age matter when there is attraction? It was hard to say whether the reply was an assessment of her possible involvement with the professor or an unwitting betrayal of feeling for him. Aiden turned again to the window to hide his guilty knowledge. Emma slowed after turning onto Broadway, pondering, "Would you like to keep me company while I shoot pictures out at the Putt-Putt Golf Park?" Aiden's silence always meant acquiescence. The photographer swung around short of the coffeehouse and sent her car speeding in the opposite direction. If the Halloween party worked against Aiden, he fares no better at the miniature golf course. When you have autism, even a miniature golf course can be terrifying. And this is no garden variety miniature golf course. Chapter 10. The Obstacle Course. According to Emma, the miniature golf course, originally called Putt-Putt Palace, fell on hard times in the early 80s. It was almost boarded up, but a last-minute bid by a chain of adult-themed motels saved it from demolition. Though a name change was allowed, the property was sold under the condition it remain a family attraction. Strictly speaking, the golf course did not reside within the city limits of Stone's Throw. It lay closer to the neighboring town of East Vaughan, an ongoing squabble over which municipality could claim it existed. And this fueled a long-standing football rivalry between Purcell College and East Vaughan State College. Dusk was fast on the couple's tracks. Glow on the horizon made their destination easy to spot. A large billboard emerged in a cornfield to confirm their heading Peekaboo Putt-Putt 3 miles. Floodlights were disentangled from a concealment of trees, whereupon an unassuming motel sprung up next to the fenced-off park. "Here we are," Emma sang gleefully, yanking down the rearview mirror to freshen her lipstick. "Let me do the talking. I can get us in for free." With camera bag in hand, the brigand charged ahead. Aiden joined her at the ticket booth, where she was doing a number on the male ticket taker. She held up something laminated and purred through deep crimson lips. "I'm a graduate photographer at the college. I have a standing arrangement with the management to come here and take pictures without paying admission." She turned to her lagging companion and shoved her bag in his arms. "This man is my assistant." The two passed through the turnstile with surprising ease, and the first-time visitor took a moment to read the dedication plaque to the park's designer. Emma yelled to be heard over the cacophonous music. Daedalus Monet had a morbid fear of electricity. Wouldn't even come on site when they were building this place. Given the gaudy neon spectacle, any astronaut circling the Earth likely knew Peekaboo Putt-Putt was open for business. Aiden was determined to be good-humored, although his sensitivity to noises and bright lights put him on guard. The complex was bigger than it looked from outside the fence and contained many courses. Every hole was adorned with mind-boggling obstacles and tiered greens of jarring chartreuse. Some holes played on optical tricks or gravity-defying features like inverted staircases or inclines where balls appeared to roll uphill. Other courses revolved around improbable themes, such as Darwin's missing links, or imperial airships of Germany, or peptic disorders of the Edwarians. A scale model replica of the golf park stood on a large table across from the entrance. An inch-thick magnifying glass on a pivot mount marked the center of the display. Aiden leaned over to peer through it and was shocked to see thousands of fleas, grotesquely enlarged, milling around, exacting reproductions of putt-putt obstacles. The viewer backed away on realizing no plexiglass covered the exhibit. He asked the attendant, "How do you keep the fleas from escaping?" The man replied succinctly, "A magnet." Incredulous, Aiden knelt to glimpse a dark box bolted to the underside of the table. The attendant explained, "We've got little metal hats glued to their heads. Keeps them from jumping off." How would you know if one was missing? The fellow found the question nonsensical. The leggy companion had seen enough bugs. Latching onto her assistant, her heart was set on one pavilion, the House of Mirrors. She stopped at the tent's entrance with a ringing endorsement. "This will be fun." Funhouse mirrors lined the interior walls of the attraction, but there was no astroturf as such. Each hole resembled a lava lamp where struck balls rippled down long glass chambers filled with mercury-looking stuff. This required a Herculean feat of optical compensation for the putter to correct for the distortion. Additional unintended obstacles littered the thoroughfare: cigarette butts, candy wrappers, and abandoned balls in mirage-like gullies. The graduate student seemed an old hat at it, dropping one hole after another with admirable single-mindedness. The churning topography of flesh in the mirrors was of greater interest to the painter than watching himself get skunked. His feeling was one of being surrounded on all sides by Picasso's abstract brothel, La Demoiselles d'Yvenon. Emma's awning bosom and panoramic hips loomed over his every stroke. Having handedly beat her competition, the photographer tugged him back down the boardwalk. Amusement park rides were interspersed among the courses, and the sight of them, even the kiddie ones, made Aiden tremble. The Ferris wheel was the tallest attraction, and the spirited girl, scrounging in her purse for coins, gravitated toward it. The companion wanted to stop her, not out of gallantry to pay, but to spare himself humiliation. It was too late. The ride attendant strapped them into a cage, and with a screech and a lurch, they were pitched into a whole new order of insect, a cloud of flittering nightbugs. Emma only noticed Aiden's white-knuckle state when they reached the ride's apex. "Are you all right?" He stuttered. I have a thing about heights." She clutched his forearm, which resembled icy rebarb, yet could do little more than sympathetically endure his torture. Once safely returned to Earth, he felt more than foolish. He felt emasculated. This was not merely a result of the ride, but the location itself. The noisy environment deprived him of the subtle talents he employed back at the pub. His wit and charm were useless here. This was the realm of the body, and Aiden's relationship to his body was anything but felicitous. Any physical context he was likely to be thrust into in the name of recreation would either induce phobic attack, profound embarrassment, or injury. A distraught Emma insisted they rest on a bench. The tarnished knight did not want to be mollycoddled. Their repose stretched into minutes, while their respective gazes drifted in different directions. Despite the park being family-friendly, it was mostly ceded to teenagers, whom either roamed the premises in herds or, where matched up, found amorous occupations between pavilions. The photographer was blank under her smokescreen of a smile, and her companion scarcely understood how such a vivacious creature should be content with his sedentary company. She sensed his stare and leapt to her feet to snap several pictures of him. Aiden did not want his photo taken, but his effort to dissuade her only egged her on. Prodded to his feet, the two were again swimming upstream. They passed one course under a poppy-red big top. Sawdust was scattered between the greens, while the smell of simulated elephant dung lent authenticity to the circus experience. Inflatable clowns roared like blowtorches around the perimeter and terrorized anyone approaching the carousel horses. Emma sought to de-escalate the tension and chose a course themed on a Las Vegas-style wedding chapel to round out the evening. No matter how many distractions surrounded them, Aiden did not relish being judged against the backdrop of Valentine's with a woman many years his junior. Regardless, the pair worked their way down a set of holes based on oddly shaped wedding cakes. One hazard included a Dickensian literary reference, cobweb fondant falling off a four-tiered monstrosity entitled "Lest We Forget a Jilted Miss Havisham." Mercifully, there were only 8 holes by which to measure his humiliation this time. Although the last obstacle was slow coming into view, it was Jacques Chrétien remade as a stone cupid, complete with bow and arrow and adult diapers. He already spotted the two, and his look was one of being found out. A child just then struck a ball that rolled to within inches of one of his feet. He broke his stance to snatch it up when it passed. The little boy, not anticipating this, screamed before laughing at his scare, whereupon Jacques resumed his pose. Emma said nothing, but stepped around the little man's plot of turf to the final hole. Squaring herself with the tee, she made a hole-in-one with characteristic steeliness. A robotic priest, resembling a one-armed Vegas bandit, piped up with a canned rendition of Wagner's Bridal Chorus. 2 plastic wedding rings popped out of its change slot. She was wandering back to the boardwalk before the refrain finished, leaving sentimental Aiden to grab the 2 rings and hurriedly catch up. The photographer dimmed with a confession.
Jacques had a crush on me for a while. He even posed in my yard.
As more pieces fell into place, Emma hooked Aiden's arm with a widening stride and a rebounding smile. Another tug had them heading in an unpromising direction. Twirling rides buzzed their scalps, flinging off their brightest enamel paints. A tangle of cables lay over a muddy path ahead of them. The guide negotiated the treacherous terrain ably in her heels, while the less sure man dragged like a plow behind her. The passageway narrowed and darkened, with snarling trestles. Tanks of compressed air hissed like reptiles from open pits. A blue-gray nimbus suggested a patch of night sky, and when Aiden emerged from his latest rite of passage, he confronted a chain-link fence. The photographer glanced back with a furtive glint.
"Here's the gate."
Both ducked under a padlock chain and crept along a weedy boundary shared with the adult motel. Aiden squinted up at the large neon blue moon perched on the roof ledge. It sputtered down a warning. Peekaboo Motel. The brazen girl glanced up too, but not at the signage. A maid's cart was parked outside one of the rooms on the second floor, prompting her to catapult up loosely riveted wrought iron stairs toward it. The peeling handrail shimmied and flaked with each shift of her shapely skirt. The heart-stopping view of her from below was mitigated by alarm over her action. Aiden reached the upper walkway to see her rush down it, brushing each doorknob in passing with open fingers. All the rooms were named the Honeymoon Suite. The squat building vented a chorus of pounding headboards, effectively trapping the timid man between a scrawny handrail and the drumskin of an exterior wall. He pushed past the squeaking doors to where Emma was planted. Without argument, a demure Hispanic maid stepped around the taller woman from the door and cleared off. The abandoned room was a dank, windowless dungeon. Sections of flimsy, wood-paneled walls bowed outward, as if pressed in a vise. A proverbial yellowed lampshade lent a tawdry glow to the few sticks of furniture. The seedy decor thoroughly entertained Emma, leaving her to stretch out blithely on the bed like a cat. Even amid such grubbiness, her turquoise eyes shined.
"Isn't this place hysterical?"
she squealed. A television, turned off, sat near the foot of the bed. A screw-cap bottle of wine and plastic jack-o'-lantern, brimming with day-glow condoms, sat on a bureau across from it. As Aiden's gaze swept lightly over these accoutrements, he noticed queer tube-like shadows on the wall. When they suddenly moved, and in a way that suggested the legs of an insect, he jerked around to spy a woolly spider on the lampshade. The rumble in the wall drew the attention of both to a closed-circuit video camera mounted above them. Its lens was trained on the bedstead with voyeuristic intent. Emma's hip rose majestically out of the lumpy mattress on turning to face him. The cut of her line was confidently quick.
"Well, Mr. Gage,"
she growled,
"aren't you going to take your putt-putt bride to have and to hold?"
Aiden stayed in the doorway, rubbing together the two plastic rings in his pocket, while striving to remain unconnected from the naughty intrusion. In his judgment, Emma was making into flirtation something that was, in many ways, still infantile to her. It was a piece of stagecraft rehearsed in her genes, if not entirely in her thoughts. The painter was prone to overanalyze any and all moments of truth that snuck up on him. Intellectual detachment, no matter how hastily or shoddily erected, was his signature excuse for never leaping into the unknown. His partner in crime was slow to register his disapproval, but, on appreciating it, sat up more self-consciously than she had reclined. She made a segue of her watch and cobbled together a grin.
"I guess we should go before they kick us out."
Aiden was the talkative one on the return trip to town, mainly because he needed to redeem himself for a poor showing on so many fronts. Emma pulled up curbside at the quadrangle. He was about to close the car door, resigned to failure, when she suggested,
"If you would like to come by my studio at Arbor Hall in the late morning, I will show you more of my work."
With another smile of reassurance, she drove away. The suitor could not say where things were going, but was comforted by the ambiguity he perceived in the woman's situation. As long as he supposed Emma had a lover, he believed himself to be safe. Aiden's relationship with women was complicated, and in more ways than an age difference. When a young man, he was terminally shy. It was not until his late 20s he overcame his shyness well enough to attempt dating. He always possessed a capable wit, and eventually discovered he could adapt this talent to the art of flirtation. Unfortunately, this activity became an end in itself and bore little fruit. At best, it produced friendships with sexual attraction as a component. At worst, it led to unrealized aspirations that ended in painful awkwardness. He was not unattractive, but feelings of inadequacy and fear of rejection crippled any chance he had at forming a significant attachment. In spite of these obstacles, a few efforts at romance were attempted before the age of 32. All of them with females who, in some sense, pursued him. Resultingly, they were backward affairs, where, grateful to be spared the embarrassment of making a declaration of intent, the man found himself being pulled along by circumstance and a strong-willed woman, until inevitable difficulties ended the union. These difficulties stemmed from a lack of communication. The painter misread cues and interpreted silences wrongly. Not all these relationships were consummated, but of the ones that were, few endured beyond 6 weeks. They were still attractive women to return his stares, but what had been arduous labor stoically borne in youth was now viewed with a smidgen of resentment, if not outright indifference. Even when he was actively courting, he felt the onerous burden of making the relationship engaging fell disproportionately on him. He either needed to invent the woman from the barest of curriculum vitae, or invent excuses for her glaring flaws. It was work for him either way, to carry on a conversation for two or hold his tongue. Still, it was not that the suitor was no longer capable of falling in love because of such difficulties, but the duty, the pleasure of making an extraordinary effort was never asked of him by the prize of an extraordinary woman. In short, he spent his whole life being faithfully, even heroically, in love with someone he never met.